Panelist?
I was invited to talk about the subject that I did. I don't know anything about the issue, and I've got the good sense not to say it.
Ditto.
Yes, sir.
So, on this, hello? So I would like to just repeat what I said before. For African American and Latino students, particularly for those who are not making it currently through the school system, our little work that we have done, and we've been working at this now for a quarter of a century, says that they have to step up to the plate. They have to double up on their math. Getting the grades at the state exam and getting the current grades for SAT or ACT that allows you to graduate from high school does not give you a ticket to college to do college math for college credit, right? And so we have worked very hard to figure out what to teach and how to teach it. And these are for kids at the bottom, right? And because our metaphor is not closing the gap, our metaphor is raising the floor. What's the appropriate floor for every child in this country so that then when they leave high school, they should graduate on time from high school, and they should leave high school ready to walk their way through college, have the opportunity to do that, even if they decide not to do it, and they should not remediate college math when they get there. But to do that for the kids at the bottom, then we have to have a program which says, look, you've got to step up. You've got to double up on their math, and you've got to, we on our side have got to provide them with the teachers and the math that allows them to say, yes, I can do this and I can keep on doing this, right? So they're not going to get into these jobs without the math. They're not going to do it.
Yes, sir.
Commissioner Taylor, you asked the question, did Afro-North Americans value education? And I just want to answer that. Afro-North Americans value knowledge. Whether the notion of formal education and formal school seems to work for everyone is another kind of issue. But people do value knowledge, and you see that every day with the variety of ways that people ask questions and want things. I wanted to ask the panel, and I wanted to also say that it's an honor to be in the presence of two revolutionaries, Bob Woodson and Bob Moses, who've really put their lives on the line in the old days. Well, maybe they're not so old, but you know, in ways that really mattered in the past. I wanted to ask the panel about, in terms of education, something that I'm very interested in, about the biology of poverty. We have a lot of data now that demonstrate how poverty via the neuroendocrine axis actually affects brain development, cognition, and we can now break it down in terms of which areas of brains and what kind of knowledge is actually affected in terms of learning acquisition. So I would make the argument that unless we address the issue of poverty, and poverty isn't simply low income, it's a particular kind of deprivation that actually induces stress. Unless we address those issues, then what Mr. Moses is talking about in terms of fully acquiring that knowledge and that algebra base will not take place. So I'd like the panel to address the issue of poverty's impact on cognitive abilities in this quest to realize what in theory the civil rights movement gave in terms of a so-called equal education.
Yeah.
I know that poverty has those effects. I'm not familiar with the biological research that you're talking about, but we do know from years of study of the poverty. It's not the money per se. It's the consequences of poverty. That's why the single-parent family is an issue. The two strongest predictors of the family of achievement, cognitive skill, and this is stronger than anything like education or income, poverty, family structure. The two strongest factors are parenting, and that's how much instructional time parents give to their children at very, very early ages, frankly, starting in the crib, starting in infancy, and also the emotional support that they give. Poverty works through the mechanisms of this parental instruction and emotional support by creating a difficult environment for single parents and poor parents to have the resources to be a good parent. And that is less things in the home, less time, less interest in reading materials, the various kinds of stimulations that middle-class parents give. So I don't think it's poverty per se in the sense of money. It's what poverty leads to in terms of the stimulation of the child in the very early years.
I have to say for the record that there is evidence that links the deprivation of poverty in terms of the stress response to actual neurological and brain development. The Science and Ecology of Early Development, funded by the NIH at sessions a few years ago, demonstrated this, researchers at the University of Pennsylvania. So I beg to differ with you that it's only that experience that you talk about. That's a part of it.
Let me just intercede. The question is, and I don't mean this to sound disrespectful, but the issue was, so what? What do we do with regard to solving the problem, given what you just said? And that's the challenge that we face here. And I'm saying to you that much of what we have done over the past 40 years to do what you're suggesting, address poverty, has often injured with the helping hand. 80% of the money that we have spent to address these kind of problems go to an industry of people who ask not which problems are solvable, but which problems are fundable. I sat on the, let me tell you, I sat on a NIDA board where billions of dollars are poured into academic institutions to address those neurological and social correlatives to poverty, and most of it's crap. It's there to fund research and enrich academics. It is nothing that is grounded in reality. And so I'm saying let's not get too sophisticated when we throw out these propositions as if somehow there is the complicated description is synonymous with a complicated answer. It is not a complicated answer. Go into communities where kids have suffered exactly those symptoms and find out why some of them are thriving in spite of those conditions, and let's learn from them. Okay, let's not make this an academic debate.
No, and I agree with you, sir, but that is precisely what has to be done. What Mr. Moses talked about in terms of ways of learning how to get around certain issues with students who did not conceptualize problems in particular ways, he instrumentally demonstrated very specifically a method to get around some of that may be the result of this altered cognitive ability. So no, I didn't throw that out to be pedantic or rhetorical.
Right.
That's fine.
I just wanted to, as somebody who sees, we have many students who arrive at the school, and so some of the concrete things that we do as a school and on an individual student-to-student basis is we can, one of the things that brain science has also demonstrated is that there are interventions that can actually change those neural pathways to rebuild things that might have been there if kids had, for instance, lots of verbal exposure as young kids. And it does take a while for us to be able to catch kids up, but we absolutely can do it. And one of the things I think that is where we are in education, I would make the analogy to healthcare, except for we're a little bit behind. I think that, you know, we established that there were standards of care in healthcare. For instance, we don't blood anymore. If somebody's really sick, we don't cut them and let the blood bleed out. We actually do know a tremendous amount of how to make sure that kids catch up with the starting assumption that actually they can, which is when it's not there. But those standards of care, we have not articulated sufficiently and clearly enough. And the research actually in education is just ridiculously small relative to other countries and other industries. So I would suggest that we actually do have those interventions, and they are very much grounded in, you know, sitting on the same panel with Dr. Moses is a great honor because we've tried to emulate virtually everything he's ever said or done, as far as I can tell, at our one school. But there are absolutely things that we can do for individual children to make sure that they can help mitigate those challenges that they absolutely face from not having those resources.
I'm told we have time for one more question.